Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel. Thanks for logging on. If you enjoy these videos, do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Watchbox Reviews. If you love this watch, you can see it and you can buy it on our website, thewatchbox.com. And today we are discussing a Rolex Oyster Perpetual Submariner 1680. This is what's technically known as a Red Submariner, and we'll discuss why this is a red sub and why it's a Mark IV dial. A timepiece 39.5 millimeters in stainless steel and exceptionally fitted with a period-correct Jubilee bracelet. It's a comfortable watch, a distinctive watch, a beautifully well-preserved watch, and a fun point of entry into vintage Rolex with a distinctive and iconic model. Now on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see that this was a kinder, gentler time in Rolex, and decades before the Super Case. The watch wasn't even a 40 millimeter. I measure it at 39.5 at the edge of the bezel, so that's an extreme. In practical terms, it's probably more like a 38.5 or 38 millimeter watch in diameter. The watch is thick, however, as you can see, especially when fitted with a fresh plexi. These were thick watches, 13.7 millimeters thick, making it exactly as thick as a 2018 Omega Seamaster Diver 300. Lug to lug, it's nice and compact and an easy watch to wear on a small wrist. Small wrist, go vintage Rolex. 47.5 millimeters lug to lug with a surprisingly contemporary lug spacing of 20 millimeters. Now the timepiece is in good condition. I'm not going to tell tales and I'm not going to insult your intelligence. It's not perfect, and I'll show you everything that's right and potentially less so with the watch. Let's talk about the bracelet for starters. Now this is a watch with a serial number that places it roughly in 1971. It's a 2.8 million. So the timepiece features a Jubilee bracelet, which is a reference 6751H, and I'll try to show you all of this to verify, but you can see that the interior clasp is stamped with a 470 mark, indicating manufacture in the fourth quarter of 1970. So that's perfectly appropriate for a 1971 serial number watch. These two things likely would not have left the factory together, but they are a perfect fit together. The end links, for those wondering, are 55. Now the timepiece, let me see if I can show you the reference of the bracelet just to verify, because of course facts matter, with a 5251H is the reference number of the bracelet. So this is a period-correct Jubilee, something you'd be more likely to see on a Datejust or, for example, a GMT, and indeed that might be the root of this particular bracelet. A GMT is a perfect match for that bracelet, and this watch is unfortunately not completely perfect, but in good condition. You can see that the lugs on the 3 o'clock side are superb, tons of metal retained, and you can even see that there's plenty of the original factory bevel left in that lug. You can see on the crown side the lug is a little bit more reduced, and it's clearly been finished or at some point likely dented and then refinished to remove the dent or indentation. And the same is true on the opposite side. As you can see, there's a little bit of wear on that lug, and there's far more metal and volume on the 9 o'clock side, so universally these lugs are stronger on the 9 o'clock side. I'm tilting it through the light so you can see that hairline bevel still present on the lug. The outer face of this case is remarkably intact. The crown guards are in superb shape. They show no loss of metal and no loss of form. The bezel is a service piece, and again, this is one of those times where it's just best to talk about facts, because vintage watches need to be sold as is. They're non-standard, and you need to know what you're getting. There's a bezel, as with all subs from this period, that is bidirectional, and it is a service bezel with a service insert and of course super luminova for the luminescent pearl rather than the previous tritium. The dial, however, is all tritium, and it is a wonderful example of a Mark IV red sub. Now the timepiece has what's known as a Mark IV. A few things that make it a Mark IV, well, you can't quite see it, but you will note that the red of Submariner is particularly bright on this watch, and that's because for the Mark IIs and the Mark IVs there was actually white underneath. It was printed white sub and then red sub superimposed over, so you see a little bit of the white shining through, adding to the brightness of the Submariner script. You can also see that it's a feet first watch, so the first 3 featured meters first, and this was the first of the dials, the Mark IV, to feature feet before meters. And you know it's not a Mark V because if you look, the serifs of the F and the T, they don't align perfectly, and on a Mark V they would. There'd also be open 6s, but slightly more closed, to the point that they almost close entirely on a Mark V. The dial is antiseptic. It's easily the best part of this watch. It features convincing period patina, which is to say it doesn't look too perfect. There are flaws to these indices. There's a chip missing here and there, of course removed from the dial of the watch over time during service, but the fact that it looks superbly preserved rather than preternaturally intact is the reason that this is a great museum piece and a time capsule dial rather than something suspiciously clean. The hands at center, likewise, they are correct tritium hands from the period, and you can see that they've been handled a little over time, but they're in excellent condition. You can see that there is a correct date disc. It's not perfect, it does feature a few marks, but that's the nature of things with 50-year-old watches. Now, the timepiece internally featuring Rolex Caliber 1575. You can't see it underneath the oyster case back because solid case back, but it's a 26-jewel automatic, 45 to 48 hour power reserve. It beats the quirky vintage beat rate of 19,800, and it features a early example of hacking seconds. This was the very beginning of hacking seconds on the sub. The quickset wouldn't come until later, but the timepiece featuring a quirky beat rate, but everything you'd expect of a Rolex chronometer. Free sprung balance with an overcoil hairspring and a COSC chronometer certification. It also features 200-meter water resistance in theory. I would not test that theory. Some people do swim with vintage dive watches. I recommend that you not. There are too many other watches that you can take into the water, starting with the obvious G-Shocks and Timex Ironmen. Keep this dial as clean as the day I deliver it to you. This is one to wear. Not a perfect watch, but a superb survivor, and over time, as rising tides lift all boats, good dials, mostly intact cases, period bracelets, all of these things become more and more desirable. Like I said, it's an impressive point of entry to vintage Rolex, but it's no longer an entry-level vintage Rolex. Join the party and get in on the fun on the Watchbox.